I'll just kick off first by giving a quick overview of the Writers Access Group Development Programme, or WAGS, as we like to call it. WAGS is essentially a creative training programme that aims to support and accelerate the professional development of deaf, disabled and neurodivergent writers. We want to find emerging writers who have a real desire to write for television. We're looking for writers with an original voice, a fresh perspective, and a keen interest in the medium of television, and learning more about the craft and the business of writing for television. The programme is designed specifically to support the next wave of deaf, disabled, and neurodivergent writers, helping them to hone their craft, deepen their industry knowledge, and provide pathways for talented writers to grow and progress within their careers. During their time with us, writers take part in a series of workshops, discussions, case studies, and all writers taking part work with a professional script editor to develop a brand new spec script. So this is going to be the third Writers Access Group that BBC Writersroom has run, and the application window is open right now until the 18th of April. You don't need to have a credit or agent representation in order to apply. You just need to have a sample drama or comedy drama script of 30 pages or more and be over the age of 18 and resident in the UK or Ireland. All details on how to apply are available over on the BBC Writersroom website. We'll be holding a Zoom drop-in session on Tuesday, the 4th of April, and we'll share details of how to join that on our website and social media shortly. That's your opportunity to ask the BBC Writersroom team directly any questions about the programme or the application process itself. I think that's it in a nutshell. Enough from me for the time being. I've rambled on for long enough. And like to now introduce you to our brilliant guests. We have writers Mandy Redvers-Rowe and Rob Kinsman with us today. Both are alumni of the Writers Access Group, and they're doing really interesting work in the industry right now. So I'm sure they're going to have loads of nuggets of wisdom and insight for everybody. I'll just hand over to the writers themselves to introduce themselves briefly and tell us a bit about their work and their writing careers to date. So Mandy, can I start with you?
Yeah, thank you, Jess. Hello everyone. So let me describe myself. I'm a white woman. I've got brown bobbed hair and I've got a black jumper on. At the moment I'm in my bedroom. So I've got a white wardrobe behind me. So just a white wall, I think, really behind me. Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you. Did you want more at this stage, Jess? I'm trying to work out
if you could tell us a bit about what you've been up to recently.
What I've been up to. Okay, yeah. Lovely. Okay, so I'm currently writing for 3 CBBS programs, which is brilliant. Biff and Chip. My latest episode was actually out yesterday at 5:15 yesterday, but you can get it on iPlayer, which is Gardening Wizard. I write for Dog Squad, which is a brilliant new children's CBBS program, which is all about assistance dogs. So I absolutely love that. And I've written on the first series, and I've literally last week, the week before, I've been on a 2-week story conference for series 2 and 3. And I'm currently, this morning, basically, the last few days I've been getting my pitches together for those series, so full on. And I'm working for another one which I can't say anything about because I've had to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, because it's a brand new series. All of these, when I started on them, were brand new. I was on the first series of Biff and Chip and first of Dog Squad and the first of this one, which I can't mention because you sign this well, not always, but with this one particularly, I had to sign a very American style contract where I cannot say anything, but it is an animation and it is with McKinnon and Saunders, and I've written a couple for them. I've got a rom-com in paid development with Seesaw Films, which is very exciting. And I had my script that I developed with BBC Writersroom under option, but it's just come out of option again, and I'm going to work on it, and I have a plan for it. So that's me at the moment.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mandy. Lots of exciting stuff there.
Mm.
And Rob.
Hello. I'm a white man in my late 40s wearing glasses. I've got a greying beard and not a lot of other hair left. And I'm wearing a sort of blue jumper. And behind me is a blue wall with a weird pattern on it that I've never understood. It was there when we moved in and we haven't painted it yet. There's weird white patches. I don't know what they are, why they're there. I've been working writer for about 15 years. And I've just had my first original series produced, which is a 4-part thriller for Channel 5 with Ross Kemp in it, which we've just finished shooting and is being edited at the moment. And other than that, I've worked on some various shows, some sort of long-running ones. I've done a lot of episodes of Doctors. I did a couple of Holbys. And then lots of sort of like I've done Father Brown, Land Girls, Shakespeare and Hathaway. And then more recently, some children's shows as well. I've written a few episodes of Mallory Towers, an episode of The Dumping Ground, and I've done a couple of afternoon plays on Radio 4 as well, kind of along the line. So typical sort of working writer stuff with sort of whatever came along is suddenly my favourite thing that I've always wanted to do. But now with a sort of original show, so that's kind of very new.
That's incredibly exciting as well. Thanks, Rob. So I'll jump into our first question for both of you, and that's what made you want to write? Why did this career appeal to you in the first place? Mandy, maybe if we start with you.
Okay, yeah. Well, when I look back, I actually started writing as a child, and I have no idea where it came from because my family is not particularly artistic. But we got together every Christmas as a big, wider family. And one year my aunt had a sort of nativity from her magazine that we all did. And I loved it so much. I said, oh, well, I'll write next year's. I don't know where it came from. I must have been about, I don't know, about 10, 11. I wasn't very old. And from then onwards, I wrote every pantomime every year and had lots of fun with it. I absolutely loved it. But it didn't occur to me that that meant I was a writer. I lost my eyesight officially at the age of 16, and went to Chorleywood for 3 years, which is I could just call it blind school now, but it was blind girls school for girls with little or no sight, and that does come into my writing story at some point, so that's why I've mentioned it. And then I went to uni. It's something I didn't ever think I'd do previously because I'd gone to a comprehensive. I was okay, I was average, nothing was expected of me academically. But what happened when I lost my sight is going to the school, suddenly there's only 2 or 3 of us in each class sometimes, and I couldn't really get away with just coasting. I had to actually work, and I found I was actually okay. I could actually do quite well academically, whereas nothing had been expected of me before. And so I hadn't given anything, and suddenly people were expecting things of me, and I produced. So I got my A-levels and went to university, and I took drama initially as a one-off thing, and I've got to be careful not to go on for too long, but I wanted to be, drama took over my life, and I really wanted to be an actor. And when I left, I met up with, I became involved in the disability politics movement and met some great friends. And we decided that one of the problems for me wanting to be an actor was there was just no work for blind actors at the time. And so we decided to write our own sketches. So I became a sketch writer. We wrote and performed our own work. And then I became a sketch writer for the disability programs unit. And then that sort of shut, and I sort of lost track. I just didn't think I was a writer, so I sort of let it all go. I was always working, I had children, had this massive writing break where I tried to write, but I didn't like anything I wrote. And then I did do a competition and got through to the final and started my writing journey. I'm cutting it short because I don't want to talk. Just started my writing journey and went and did my master's, and slowly worked my way back into the industry.
Brilliant, thank you. And Rob, how about you? Where did it all start for you?
I think, like, when I was about 14, probably, I was in a youth theatre, And I can remember this moment of like sitting in the wings of this theatre, because you can kind of see the fly tower above and you can see sort of both sides of it. I just remember thinking it was magical and there was just something really amazing about it. And I just wanted to be part of that world and doing whatever that thing was. So it wasn't like specifically I wanted to be a writer, I just wanted to make drama or plays or something. And so I went to university, I did theatre studies, and then I did like every job you can do in theatre. I did sort of bits of acting, directing, everything. And eventually I sort of thought that writing was maybe the thing I might be good enough at, or could get good enough at, that I could make a living out of it, that I could see I wasn't the right sort of person or have the skills to be an actor or a director. But I sort of did that, and I had enough sort of nice rejections from stuff I was sending out that were sort of positive enough, like, oh, there's something here, but these are the things you can't do. So I thought, well, I'll go and learn those things. So I did a creative writing MA at UEA, just to learn kind of the craft bit and that, how you structure stuff. And then kind of off the back of that, I sent stuff out and got lots more no's. But I got shortlisted for competition, which was Writersroom, actually, sort of probably was 20 years ago. And then sort of off the back of that, I got an agent. And then through that, I then got onto Doctors in 2006. So that was my first thing. And then I kind of stayed and then always sort of had that as kind of in the background if I've not been doing something else. But yeah, just somewhere along the line, just discovered I kind of love stories, and there's something about that moment where it suddenly fits, and it's like being a detective. It's like, oh my god, if that goes there and she does that and she does that thing, then that's amazing. And so that buzz, that moment, I suppose that's why I love it and put up with all the trouble there is getting to do it as a job, of having no money at first and being told no all the time. But that's kind of why I do it anyway.
That magic moment that's maybe like 1% of the whole job when it all comes together.
Blot out the years of no.
Yeah.
Everybody tells you. So
brilliant. Thanks, Rob. Mandy, you mentioned that you started out writing sketches and stage plays and things like that to start with. How did you find that transition then, from moving from theatre, sketches, performance, that sort of thing, more into television writing and writing for the screen?
Yeah, it's a very precise art, television, but as a control freak, it's sort of, once you get it, it's absolutely brilliant, because you have complete control over dialogue and everything. And obviously on stage, although people are not meant to, they things happen, and the actors, the whole idea is that you can't direct people's attention in the same way or anything, but on television you can sort of put the lens up as a focus on the bits you want to show, but you do have to think differently. And I used to think you had to think about every camera angle, but you don't. Well, I don't. I think about how it might appear in my head, and then you have to think, particularly now, about the speed at how things move. And when you watch TV, you realize in an initial intro to a story, you can show so much of the backstory in a matter of minutes, well, less than minutes. So you've got to be really clear about what bits you do. In your head you've got the whole story, but you've got to choose. And I think this is true for theatre as well, but yeah, it's very precise. You've got to choose which bits you tell, and then you have to be very careful about your timings and things. I think the big surprise I had, my first TV drama was Jimmy McGovern Moving On, which was I got that in 2019, just before I started the Writers Access group. And I was so glad the Writers Access group came along, because I sort of thought I'd get my first TV drama and that would be it. I'd get loads of work. But going back to my point, it didn't happen. I needed a bit more tools in my kit before that happened, which I got from the Writers Access group. But what I did learn from the Jimmy McGovern piece is that I'd been so used to cutting down and down with sketches, tighter, tell everything in a minute sort of thing. When you came back to writing TV drama, I had to allow a scene to unfold. You know, I had to allow it, and that was a bit scary because I was so used to doing everything quite tight. Yeah, that's something I've learned to go back to allowing, which is what you can do on stage, but I'd learned not to do in sketch writing for TV, and then allowing that again for TV drama at the right times. And you choose your scenes, but and Rob knows much more about this than me, but allowing that to unfold in real time, as it were, was quite scary again.
Yeah, giving scenes time and space to breathe, I guess, and you're almost the first editor, aren't you, on the piece of work, as you're figuring out the timings and the pacing of the story unfolding. Yes.
Yeah, you do get a lot of help from your editor, which is amazing. But yeah, in your head when you're writing, so I've learned so much. I sort of hardly know what to say about what I've so, yeah, hope that helps.
One for both of you. What was it like being part of the Writers Access Group? How did the programme impact your development as a writer? Rob, maybe if you could take that first.
I think for me, it was just because I was sort of in a different place to a lot of the other people, in that I was already earning a full-time living as a writer when I started. So I didn't sort of need to go and do sessions of what a script editor does and stuff, because I sort of knew that. But what it did give me was, partly the main thing I wanted was to help writing a better spec script. Because it's kind of your most important script, it's also the thing you get the least help with. Whilst if you're actually producing something, you've got hundreds of people telling you what to do, and there's endless notes and stuff, whilst this is your thing and you don't have that. So I wanted to help with that, but then I sort of, incidentally, the sort of community of it, I suppose, in the other group, just like everyone was really nice and really genuinely supportive of each other. And because I've been part of lots of writers groups of various sorts in the past, who are all like, we're the best mates, but I will stab you in the back if there's any way I can get some possible advantage. It's very kind of ruthless and stuff. And this is the only group that actually seemed genuinely, if somebody else got something, we were glad for them. It wasn't, why wasn't it me? It wasn't that sort of thing. And, you know, and then kind of kept in touch with, you know, quite a lot of the people, and a couple of them sort of very regularly. So it's just kind of given me that kind of community, I suppose, around, because I think there is something different with all being disabled people. It is something extra and different, but that actually, whatever the disability is, because we've all got different ones, it's something we've kind of got in common, I think. And so actually that's been a big part of it for me, was just feeling part of that community and just kind of getting confidence. I think I'd got in a bit of a lull before it, and I was a bit like, yeah, I'm sort of making a living, but nothing ever is moving forward, nothing new is ever coming up. And you know, and I think having friendly competition is kind of good, and it kind of keeps you on your toes. Yeah, it's only made me get more focused. And you know, for me, it's obviously now paid off, because it's eventually led on to getting a series of my own. So it's
community, motivation, focus.
It was like taking it seriously again, I suppose. It was like putting everything in focus and just not drifting, and just like, oh, this is what we're trying to do and how to do, and just being able to be a bit more targeted about, well, so what am I doing wrong? Like, why aren't these things happening? And what are the things I can do, can I actually do, that would improve my chance of being lucky, you know?
And having a peer network sort of holding you accountable for all those things as well, it does help, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's having people to ask advice to. So when, you know, I've had a problem with something, or I've been offered something, you know, certainly a couple of the people I've met through it, I will often talk to and say, look, what do you think about this? Or am I seeing this right? Or is this, do you know anything about these people? And, you know, so it's quite useful having people you sort of trust, that, you know, who sort of are in a similar position, sort of peer position, of kind of where they're at in their career, I suppose, and so they're facing similar sorts of issues, and so you've got someone to talk them through with. So.
Yeah, instant sounding board. And how about you, Mandy? What was it like being part of the group, and did it impact your development as a writer?
Oh, completely. So as I explained I'd somehow I'd done a radio 4 play which I'd co-written, and I'd got to my first moving on my moving on with Jimmy McGovern, and so I sort of thought it would all happen, but of course that came out March the 3rd, 2020, and everything just stopped, didn't it? And I didn't have an agent, and I thought doing a moving on I would get an agent, but it didn't happen. And I realized I was in this industry sort of floundering, having no idea what to do, how to get another job, or and I tried a few things. I realized my pitching was terrible. I'd had a meeting with a potential continuing drama, and I messed it up completely. I just hadn't expected some of the questions and was so nervous. I'd completely when you dry up, I'd completely, and it's not like me. So when I got offered a place, I mean, obviously went through the interview process for this and got offered a place on the Writers Access Group, and had all these wonderful workshops that were amazing and really, really what I needed. Introduced me to, I mean, just before I'd read the John York book on Into the Woods, and then we got to meet John York, and he did this amazing session about middles. And I am a complete convert now. I love structure. I didn't know anything about it really before, and I realized that was where I'd floundered in the past with script, when I hadn't known what to do next. That now I think about, I go to my structure and what needs to happen where, and then it opens up things in the script for me. It opens up ideas, and so I use structure when I get stuck. I don't start with structure, but I certainly have a knowledge now of it, but when I get stuck I go to my notes, and something opens up because of it. So structure is brilliant. Pitching, the pitching workshops, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful for those. I was such a rubbish pitcher before.
People are terrified of pitching, aren't they? We get asked a lot about pitching, so yes.
Oh, it's terrifying. I'm still nervous about it, but I'm getting there. It's not like I suddenly know how to, but it gave me the tools of what to think about. And then the comedy one was great for me, because I've been a sketch writer quite a long time ago, and I hadn't written comedy since, and I just thought, well, maybe I'm just not funny anymore, and all that thing, because comedy changes and styles change. And we, in the session, they gave us an exercise, and I did something and sent it back within the session, and I got this lovely feedback going, yeah, really funny. I was going, oh, maybe I can still write comedy. That's okay. So just reassurance that. But as Rob said, my group, my WAGs, we love each other so much. We're still in regular WhatsApp chats, and it's a really good place to bring those difficult things. If a few people are approached by somebody at the same time and people are not sure about things, we share it on the chat, and then people can go, oh, that's happened to me too, or whatever. Discussions about, we're having a discussion at the moment about general meetings you have with production companies, and how do you approach them, how do you think about them as a writer, and what so we're just sort of going together through this journey of becoming professional writers, and we have people we can share with who are in a similar place to us, our concerns and worries and our learning. We share our learning a lot. So yeah, we regularly have Zooms, a couple of times a year, and when we can, we meet up, because we never actually met in person because we were the COVID group.
Oh, so, yes.
And then we met at the end, and I couldn't make it to the last session, but were the actual people we actually met in London. So I didn't make that, but I have met quite a few of my WAGs. Some have come up to the north where I live, to Liverpool, and I've been down to London and met a few. So, but I've not met everyone yet. But yeah, we're all very close. And like Rob said, there's a really strong, I think that's a really important supportive network. It really helps us understand the world, and that aspect of being disabled writers, although all of us, might think differently about our approach to writing. That's all fine, but we share what we learn, and we share experiences, and we just have a lot of chats, and we celebrate each other's successes, which is lovely.
Yes, that's the best part of it, I think, isn't it? It's that community. And We'll have to get, once we know who our next group of WAGs are, we'll have to have a big WAGs 1, 2 and 3 reunion party or something, bring everybody together, and a networking session. That would be fun, wouldn't it? We should do that. Rob, were there any sessions that stood out for you? Was there anything that was particularly helpful for you, or was it more the script editing, the spec?
There was one accidentally helpful session where they went to, which I was not supposed to be participating in. I was supposed to bring up the other side of it, which was about writing doctors, which I think I'd done, I don't know, 50, 60 episodes by that point. And so the idea was to go and ask questions, and I was sort of there as the writer to tell the other writers. But we had this session, the exec producer was there, and he was telling us about the show. I was like, I didn't know that. And he was like, oh, we do this because of this. He's like, do we? And then afterwards, I was like asking other writers, the regulars, like, did you know we do this? He's like, no. And like, no, I'd never heard in all those years of working on, like, how it's all set up and why it's set in this place and why it's all about. So I accidentally found that completely fascinating, even though that wasn't the point of the session, and I should have known all of these things, because actually when you work on it, because we never meet up and there's never anything, so you just sort of start, and if they like you, just kind of keep trotting along and
keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, you don't have like the session we had, which is where they sit and they explain what everything is. So that was accidentally fascinating. But there were some good like networking sessions and things as well. So that's always very good when you get to meet people, and some of which may lead to things, most of which probably won't, but it's just kind of good practice at just getting used to that sort of schmooze, I suppose, as well.
Yeah. Getting your face out there and in front of people. Yeah,
and just trying to not be overly intimidated by everyone when you kind of see them, and if you meet them somewhere slightly more relaxed, and actually, I met some people and still have some contact through those sort of sessions. So I think that's always kind of useful.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, a really important element of the WAGs program is the opportunity to work with a script editor and to define and develop a new TV spec script. What was it like developing a spec script on a program, and what did you get out of that experience? Maybe Mandy, if we start with you, because it was most recent for you, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it was an amazing experience. So my script editor was Jeremy Page, and I think he was script editor for about 3 or 4 of us. And we started with having 5 ideas, and that in itself felt very challenging. I'd had a few ideas that I'd worked on in my head or written down for just generally thinking about ideas of what I might develop myself. So I had 1 or 2, and then I had to come up with a few others, and that exercise itself was really, really useful. And then we did choose 1 from my list of 5, and I started working on it, and I was quite passionate about this one, and I think that Jeremy said that's what he said he picked up on, and it was Amira at the time. They both picked up on that was the one I was most interested in, and that's a really interesting thing to learn, because since then, when I've pitched, I found that if I really love the thing I'm pitching, I sort of can take people with me on that journey. So there is this sort of, I'm not the cool professional pitcher. I sort of get really excited about an idea and start to imagine it and live it, and all of that. So yeah, I loved the script editing process. I think I did about 4 drafts through the process, and it was optioned, straight after. A lot of people were interested in it, actually, and it got optioned quite quickly by Saffron Cherry Productions. It's now out of option, and my agent has a script editor she sent it to, and I've got some notes on it, and I'm going to redraft it, and I'm thinking of entering it for the Alfred Bradley. So yeah, there's
that was a neat plug there, Mandy. You've just
I realised I shouldn't have said that.
You've just plugged Alfred Bradley. No, that's good. That's another opportunity that's open right now. Yeah. On message.
So I think it might not get done for TV, but I've got this script that I'm really proud of and that I really like, and it seems to stand up, and that's what a spec script is. It might not get done, and you have to sort of accept that. There's loads of stuff you realize in development that might not get done, but you have to get it to that script stage. You have to get, and it sort of shows it's like your shop window. It shows people, your writing and the sort of thing you want to write, and you've got to pack it all in there. So when I initially did my plan for 6 episodes, Jeremy said, right, 1 and 2 are in, you've got to have them as one. You haven't got, in your first idea, you haven't got enough for one. You need to put 1 and 2 together, and that's your first pilot. So you learn so much about how much story a 60-minute episode takes. It takes a lot of story. And TV does gobble up stories. And that's again where you go back to structure and you look at, but it has to be character driven. So you have to have a character that has a lot that you can work with, and that really helps. So yeah, I loved the experience, and Jeremy was fantastic and very supportive, and definitely told me when things weren't working, but also told you when things were working, which was great. And it gave me a lot of confidence working with him.
Yeah, it's brilliant just having that sort of creative ally, isn't it? Somebody to sort of challenge you and be your cheerleader as well. I think that's, it can be a really magic relationship, that when you're working with the right script editor.
And it is that confidence that you've tried out your ideas with somebody, you've thought it through, particularly when you get to complicated plot lines, and they've sort of gone, yeah, that works. And so you sort of reassure that you're, yes, it's fiction,
yes.
but there is enough in your fictional, you've created a fictional world in which that is all possible. You haven't gone beyond the realms of the fictional world you've created, and all of that is what you're trying out with the script. And to have just somebody to bounce and ask the difficult questions, go, well, if I did that, what about that? And if I did that, what about that? And that won't work. Okay.
yeah
Thank you. I didn't know, because sometimes you're in the world and you've got to try things out, but so it's very reassuring. Brilliant.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point, isn't it? Because it's spec scripts are about experimentation and taking risks and exploring your own voice, aren't they? So yeah, and having that advocate there to work with you and challenge and build your confidence as well. How did you find that process, Rob? Because you worked with a script editor as well as part of the program.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, because that calling card script is like your most important thing, because that's what people give you a job for, and that's where you can really show your voice. Because though especially if you're writing an existing show, there's always some degree where you're trying to merge in with what that show normally sounds like, and so this is your chance to do something different. And for me, it was a chance, because I've written a lot of these kind of quite cozy shows like Father Brown and Mallory Towers that are very, warm-hearted and very gentle, but they're not really the sort of thing I watch. And so actually I sort of wanted to write the sort of thing I watch, which is a much more sort of darker thriller sort of thing. And so this was my sort of chance to do that, and to see if I could write it, and to just really say this is my thing. And actually that is what then led to me getting my Channel 5 show. So because that was the spec I then sent to the company that happened to tick all the boxes for what they were looking for, so that we didn't do that show, but it showed I could write the sort of show that they were looking for. And particularly because there was a disabled character in both shows as the sort of lead. And so I think it was about the way I had written about the disabled character, by which I basically didn't mention their disability, other than how it affected them in terms of what they physically have to do. That's different. But so that was my kind of trial run for because I think if we're writing about disability, then there's different ways of doing it. There's the Jack Thornberry in your face sort of way, which is obviously kind of important, does its thing, but that's not kind of me. And so for me, it was much more making it sort of invisible, to the point that in my Channel 5 show, we never We never name what her disability is, and she doesn't have a sad speech about the day she realised she was different to everyone else, and those sort of things that tend to show up. And that's also what I've sort of done a lot of in this spec. So it was a sort of tryout for that. And I think it's just important to be true to what it is you want to write. And I think the reason it led on was like, I genuinely really love thrillers, and I like big commercial thrillers. And I know that when I did my creative writing MA, everybody desperately wanted to go and write for doctors and get into that, because they knew it was like the one show that would take new writers. And so lots of people were like, well, I'll do a spec. And what they were doing was deliberately writing what they think doctors want, which they thought was like the equivalent of the worst episodes of Doctors, where it's a very domestic, very minor, and they think, well, I saw an episode and it was rubbish, and so that's what they want. So I'm going to write a rubbish script because that's what they want to read. And I can tell you that, having worked it for a long time, that's the last thing they want to read, and they are bored out of their mind of reading those scripts. They want the exciting, sparky thing, even if it's a bit different to what they're making, because they want exciting writers who've got some voice or something they can bring to it, to do that. And that's where your spec is kind of important, because that's the place you show that voice, and you show what you're interested in, and you show what you can do that maybe the next writer can't. So but I think having an editor to work with on that was really useful, because like I say, it's your most important useful thing. It's the thing you get no help with, because you're usually adrift, and so you don't, like, nothing I've written that's been produced looks like the first draft of it. It's always been through that process of somebody else looking at it saying, oh, what about all this? And so it's kind of crazy that we don't normally get that help to do that, but obviously this is the chance where you can get that support and have it developed in a sort of more formal way.
So your advice with the spec script then would be, go bold but true to yourself and your own interests. I think
I've done a lot of trying to write stuff that someone thought was right. Because I'm quite good at writing gags, so I had this whole sort of flirtation with comedy, and I had a sitcom we developed with the comedy department at the BBC, but they never kind of worked out, and those things never did. And I think it's because that's not what I love watching. If I sit in the evening, I don't watch sitcoms. I'll watch a thriller or a sci-fi or those sort of genre stuff, because that's what I love. And I think sort of accepting, well, maybe that's the thing I should be writing, because that's what I want to watch, rather than the thing that seems sensible or seems something. So for me, that was the big thing that's now sort of paid dividends, really.
It's worked. It's done its job for you, hasn't it? For sure. And I think that spec, its job is usually to get you a job writing something else. It's, in reality, it's not the thing that is going to be made, but it hopefully shows the sort of thing you can do that is hopefully a bit like the thing someone else wants to make. Yes,
that's its purpose.
Absolutely. We've talked a lot, and my next question was about the peer network, but we've talked a lot about that, about the magic of the Writers Access Group community and the support that all the writers give each other there. So I think we'll move on to the next question, which is about time and deadlines, which is such a crucial thing for a writer, isn't it? And particularly for television writing, being able to manage time and deadlines is a skill that people need to develop. Mandy, how did you manage your time and deadlines whilst you were on the Writers Access Group? Do you have any tips for how to manage yourself?
It's I can't pretend it's easy. It's not going to be easy. Because it all depends on when the opportunities come in. So you're doing your writers' room work, which is great, and you should do your reading, watch your TV series. All of that is so valuable, and learning to not just watch TV, but I make notes now on certain series. So I can remember what my thoughts are about that series. Because I'll sort of. It's not bulk watch, is it? I'll binge watch something. That's it. And I think, before I forget my thoughts about this, I'm going to make some notes, so that if I go into a meeting, and they do always ask you about what TV you watch and stuff like that, or make producers make references to TV programs and things all the time. You need to be able to have that conversation. so you watch it in a different way. So all of that's important, but then the opportunities, they seem to come in sometimes all at once, and you're juggling deadlines. And also for me, I was still working. It wasn't TV. I think I got my first Biff and Chip at some point when I was on the writers' room, but I also have, I had some other bits and pieces that I did, as a freelancer. So you're juggling all the time, and I did have to do that thing of working through weekends and late into the night, and I don't quite know how you avoid that. One thing I'm obsessed about is I don't want to let anything go until I'm happy with it. So I've promised myself that I won't send off something just to get it on the right time if I'm not happy with it. So I tend to try and find some time somewhere. But what I've learned to do now on it's really difficult. Yeah, have I learned that? No, I don't think I have. I think you do tend to stick to your deadlines. I had the added problem at first when I did Writers Access Group that I didn't have access to Final Draft, which is the standard screen software for script writing for TV. It wasn't accessible to screen readers, not to JAWS, and it still isn't accessible to JAWS. So any visually impaired people out there, I have been working with Final Draft now, thanks to Dank, and I'm on their beta program, but I have to use it with an Apple Mac. And so it's a different way of using the screen reading software on an Apple Mac. So I do that now, and it is so brilliant being able to use Final Draft. It is so instinctive. I don't have to worry anymore about tabbing across and lining up bits of script which I can't see, which always goes wrong, and always looks a mess afterwards, and all of that sort of thing. Because when you're using screen reader software, it puts everything in the right font in the right place, as long as you've given the correct sort of you're in the correct element, which is not hard to do, and it reads it back to you, and it tells you which element it's in. So if you've made a mistake, you've made that mistake. And so I love Final Draft now, but I wasn't using that in the Writers Access Group. So I had to produce everything in Word, and then I had I have access to work support because I was freelancing and my main role is as a writer. So I did have access to work funding to ask one of my access workers, to put anything into Final Draft. But I think most of the opportunities, if I remember rightly, started with pitching ideas and applying. But yeah, I don't know how to avoid it, and it doesn't get better when you're in the real world, writing world, because things you think you've planned ahead, but something will come in unexpectedly. Or like, for example, the story conference I've just done, the 2-week story conference, we didn't know until the week before it was actually happening. It was 2 weeks before they said, oh, we'll just start the week of the 13th, and then go, oh no, we can't do the 13th, too many people are on half term, it's going to be the week of the 20th. And that I didn't find out till the Thursday before the week of the 20th. So, and I did have something else in the middle which I had told them about. So you can't plan very far ahead, because you don't get a lot of time to plan in the real professional world either. So yeah, I don't know if I can help in any way, except get a good night's sleep, do your best,
stay calm.
Sorry, say that again, Jess.
Stay calm and communicate, I guess. Yeah. As
soon as an opportunity comes in, don't procrastinate. Do it sooner rather than later, in case something else comes in on top of that. That's what I'd say. Don't procrastinate. Just get started. Start working. Yeah.
That's very good advice. Rob, presumably you've had to deal with deadlines on doctors quite a lot. Do you have any advice for how to manage?
No, I think what Mandy just said is try and get stuff done straight away, because you never know what else is about to turn up. And almost every project, it takes a lifetime for them to get around to saying yes. And then when they say yes, they want you to start in 20 minutes time. And then, they want all of your time. So it is about that. I think the one issue with time that is different for most of the people involved with this is that being disabled takes up a lot of time. Like, whatever your disability, everything takes longer. And you're dealing with added things that other writers don't. So you've got fatigue, you've got pain, you've got just things taking up time that you don't have to do. And I think part of what I've learned is to just be really clear with people I'm working about. I can't do that now. I got to do that. I'm working in the morning, so that's because I'm going to be tired in the afternoon, and I won't get, and just telling people, that I, because it takes my routines and it takes me a lifetime to get up in the morning. So if they want, oh, we'll have a meeting on Zoom at 8 o'clock and you'll all be ready. It's like, well, actually, I'm going to have to be up 2 and a bit hours before that. So, it's a different thing. And I think we just have to be very clear with them. And to be fair, I think everyone I've worked with has been fine. Like, if you're just really honest with them and say, this is what I need, then they've generally been, good to very good kind of about it. And when I have had problems, it's usually just sort of a mistake or a cock up rather than stubbornness, like we're not making things for you. I think most people I've worked with have at least tried to kind of accommodate. And I think in terms of scheduling your time, it's just doing that. And I think it's about learning your own sort of pattern. So I know, like, if I've got to write new material, the morning is the time it has to happen, because I won't concentrate as well. I can edit in the afternoon, but I can't generate new stuff on a blank page. And so it's just kind of learning that and working my timetable around kind of that. So especially writing my Channel 5 thing, because I had a huge amount to write suddenly, because I had 4 episodes to do. And so I would just change my daily routine around. So I would just get up, eat some breakfast and write. And then I would sort of get up in the afternoon, because I knew I wouldn't be getting useful stuff done. And it gave me an extra couple of hours of morning useful stuff. So I think scheduling is just like learning what your body can and can't do and making sure you fit around that.
That's excellent advice. Yeah, that level of self-knowledge as well, knowing when you can deliver your best work and when that works for you, and then just being able to communicate that, I think, with whoever you're working with. Yeah, it's excellent advice. So just thinking about post-WAGs, what sort of opportunities have opened up for you as a result of being on WAGs or following on from WAGs? Rob, I'll come to you on that one first, if that's okay.
I suppose the one thing that directly came was I did an episode of The Break, which sort of came from that, and it's actually that proved quite a useful thing to have, because actually I found when you talk to producers and stuff, if you're like, do you want to read my 70-page script, or like, do you just want to just watch this 5 minutes, just here's the link, watch this. And actually it was quite a good sort of introduction to just prove I'm not a sort of crazy person that's just sort of like, yeah, I'm all right, that actually here's the thing you can watch, and then hopefully they'll then watch more. So kind of that came from it, but I suppose it was slightly different for me because I was already kind of working, and then other stuff happened, but I'm not sure it was directly a result. But I think just for me it was just that feeling a bit rejuvenated and a bit like it was exciting again, and made me maybe latch on to the other stuff that then came along after a bit more.
Yeah. And how about you, Mandy?
Gosh, yes, so much. It's, like Rob said, it's hard to always know, but my script got optioned, etc. I got onto the EastEnders shadow scheme, which was amazing, and I learned a huge amount. I didn't get through to episode stage. And I sort of think, and again, when I started that process, I was still doing word scripts and passing them across to somebody else to put them into final draft. And so any deadline they set, and they do set deadlines really tight, I had to work 48 hours in advance to get my script completed and sent across to someone else, and then get it back and check it. That did slow me down. By, I think the second script I had actually got final draft, but again I wasn't very confident with it, so yeah, I think that may have affected it. But I learned so much about deadlines, about how to think about writing, about A, B and C, D storylines, and how important it's Rob obviously knows more about this than me, but writing is an industry as well. Money is involved, and so deadlines are crucial, and delivering is crucial in those situations. So like that. So what else? Gosh, loads. So still my script is getting me into great meetings, and I had a great meeting on Tuesday with BBC and Netflix. So That was a brilliant
Wow.
meeting. They'd read my spec script. That was lovely. And they'd also, another of my ideas that is in paid development had been pitched, and they'd liked my work and wanted to meet me, which was amazing. I got an agent afterwards, after the WAGS group. We'd had sessions on how to approach agents and everything, but yeah, it all happened for me after the course, and it is still happening, so that's great.
That's great to hear. Thanks. Rob, can you tell, you've mentioned your original series commission, which is really exciting. Can you tell us a bit more about that and how it came about and how you found the experience of writing your first original TV series?
Usually when you do these sessions, there's these sort of things. It's usually trying to correct like beginner writers' assumptions that just like, oh yeah, just somebody out of the blue phones you up and says, do you want to write something, do that, and it goes. And of course that's not how it usually happens, because there's this whole process of networking. So mine came about where I got an email out of the blue from a man I'd never met, working for a company I'd never heard of, saying, we've got a slot to make a program, do you want to do it, and what do you want to do, essentially. So it really was the thing we were always telling people never happens, kind of literally happened. They basically, Channel 5 had decided that they wanted to do a show with a disabled lead character. But again, they didn't want it to be about her disability. So they wanted it to be, and there was some sort of ideas. They had a title, Blind Spot, they wanted to call it, and they had a sort of basic setup, which would be about a woman watching cameras on an estate, and she would see something on these cameras, or something just in the blind spot of the cameras. That was the sort of basic brief, and then it was like, over to you. What does she see? What happens? So the company approached me and they read my spec I'd done as part of the WAGS scheme, and say it was a thriller. So it was the sort of genre they were looking for. It was kind of pacey with lots of twists. It was all of those, and it had this disabled character doing that sort of thing. So then my sort of second meeting was then with the commissioners at Channel 5. So it was sort of straight in at the deep end, and we sort of we spent quite a few months going through different versions of what this story might be, and it wasn't quite what they're looking for. But eventually we sort of found the gist of one, and then I had to pitch it kind of on Zoom to them, basically. So there were two commissioners, and it was like an hour of me talking at them about, the show is sort of probably maybe this, and do that. And then they said yes, and we were away. And it was all very fast. So because they'd already sort of set up the project without actually having what this project was. So we went from that first meeting to shooting in a year, which is really quick in TV terms. So I had about 6 months to write it. So it was 4 they're hour episodes, it's commercial hours. So it's about just over 3 hours of material. So it was kind of very fast in terms of like, when I did Father Brown, you had 3 or 4 months to do one episode, and I had 5 or 6 months to do 4 of them. And because it's one continuous story, so every time you change one episode, it messes up the other episodes. And doing that. But it was, it's an amazing experience. I mean, it was just, the sort of dream thing that actually because I think also my place in the pecking order was a lot higher. Was usually if you're just a jobbing writer, you just got a load of people kind of above you and you don't do this. Well, with this, because I was more involved in the whole shaping of it, so it was a lot of meetings with a lot of the top people as opposed to having 3 people to go through. And it's kind of brilliant. So if the commissioner has a problem with something, you can just talk to him and just say, explain, and either accept that he's right and then do the changes, so you're not having to worry about it 10 seconds from shooting, or you can explain to him, well, no, actually I think we've done this because of this, and then if there's a good enough reason, he does it. Whilst I found when on the past, if somebody very senior has had a note, and I was like, but I think it's wrong, because you've got to tell someone who's got to tell their boss, who's got to tell their boss, who's got to tell their boss. Essentially, it never gets through, and then it just becomes a big problem down the line because it never gets addressed. Because at some point, somebody doesn't want to talk to their boss about it. So actually, it was just totally different being a part of that whole process, and kind of right the way through up to filming. Because then Ross Kemp got cast as our sort of sort of second lead, because actually our disabled actress is in 90% of the scenes, she is the lead. So actually sort of Ross has a smaller part, but obviously he's a huge name. And so then there was a lot of kind of rewriting, trying to sort of fit it around him, because obviously he's such a well-known personality that, that we wanted to make sure it fitted him, and that he, had a lot to do, because, my sort of pet hate now is that everybody killing off the famous actor 10 seconds into the first episode for a shock, because everybody does it. I don't find it a shock anymore. It's like, I just want to watch that actor I thought was going to be in it. Like, so actually, if I want to have a God Ross Kemp, I want to at least get him in as much as we can. So that was a new experience as well, having a sort of proper big name to write around, where actually we were changing things because of him in a fundamental kind of way. So that was kind of interesting, very different. And then I was more involved. I went to some of the filming, which was in Budapest, which for some reason, even though it's set in Nottingham, they filmed it in Budapest. And it was, very unusual, because it was a very disabled friendly production, because we've got 2 disabled actors in it, including our lead. Obviously I'm disabled, the director's disabled as well. And we had 2 access coordinators, this new sort of job within telly. So we had one in the UK, and we had a Hungarian one as well in Budapest. So it was very unusual having a person sorting out all the disability stuff for us and making sure everything was smooth. And it's brilliant, and sort of hope it becomes a thing that everybody does, and I'm quite sure it won't, because you have to pay for it. But it is brilliant, and it does, being not being the only disabled person in the room was very, very different for this. So yeah, it's been a sort of fantastic kind of experience, and unusual, and just sort of out the blue, and no complaints, and just it sort of shows that when they put their mind to it, they can make things disabled friendly really well. And Channel 5, who I wouldn't have thought would be the channel that would be really good at it, actually completely went with everything we said we needed, and despite the extra cost involved, because it does cost more to have disabled actors around, and to get me to Budapest is harder, because it's not wheelchair accessible place. It's very inaccessible, so it costs more, but they stumped up the money for it and were kind of great about it. So it sort of shows where there's a will, they can do it. But how much in reality it happens, I'm probably a bit more cynical about. But yeah, for me, this was a great experience.
Sounds like it was an amazing experience. And yes, those new roles, I think, are transformative, aren't they? I do hope that they become widely adopted in the industry, because it is really important, and it does make such a difference. And I just think it's the future, and it's brilliant that Channel 5 ran the production in that way and made it so inclusive and accessible.
I think lots of, like, the industry is always like, we haven't got money to do that, but then suddenly they could all get intimacy coordinators, they could all get COVID monitors. When they're forced and pressured into doing these things, they can find the money suddenly somehow to do that. And obviously Jack Thorne's sort of speech a couple of years ago did shame a lot of people, and suddenly it got a lot more calls and stuff from a lot of companies and places who were suddenly, no, we love disabled people, like, someone go and find one quickly. It was sort of, it felt like, and I think that public pressure does make a difference, and it does force these places to do that.
Is it making you, is that sort of public conversation, that's very public conversation, I think, that's been happening recently around disability access and inclusion, is that making you hopeful for the future of the TV industry?
Definitely for me. I like you, Rob, I noticed a massive increase in interest from producers at that point. We just finished our WAGS course, and there was interest, and it felt genuine. That's good.
That's good.
I think it's certainly, it's one of the few industries where actually I think being disabled can be an advantage, and I think it can get you meetings in a way that, because I became disabled, so I've sort of had experience of doing the same. And actually, if I send an email blind to someone, then actually I get more responses when I mention I'm disabled on that email than I don't. It won't get you the job, because you've still actually got to be able to write the thing properly, but it can get a foot in the door in a way that you know, that it can be useful, and I think it is a good way of turning what could be a disadvantage into an advantage. And you know, I think I know some people have problems with the sort of using it, but I think the reality is it's an industry where if your dad runs the BBC, you wouldn't hesitate to use that advantage that you've got and that way in. And if you went to university with all the commissioners, then people don't hesitate to use that. So.
Yeah. And Mandy, can you tell us a bit about the EastEnders Shadow Scheme that you took part in? How did you find working on a continuing drama?
Yeah, like it was really good. We had a script, you had a script editor, and you had very tight deadlines. So I think for draft 1 you had 10 days, and then for draft 2 you had 7 days to complete, and that was it. I think it was 2 drafts. I think the hard thing with EastEnders is you'd get an episode. So you get an episode that another writer had written up. The storylining. So in preparation for that, you read the storylines for the last sort of X number of months, and they're huge. You know, they're huge story. You watch the program, you read the storylines, and there are people called storyliners who actually they take all the storylines and they feed them through the program. So they say, in this episode, this is going to take the lead storyline. This is going to be storyline A. Storyline B is going to be this. Storyline C is going to be this, and storyline D is going to be this. I think what I was shocked about is there is no wriggle room. You cannot go away from the structure at all, or the storyline. And the storylines are given to you in beats, so they are basically, each beat is a scene. So you know what scenes you're going to be writing, where they're going to be located, and what needs to happen in them, and then you write the script. So I found that very interesting and very different from anything I'd ever done. I think the thing is, whereas I thought I had people's voices in my head, I only seem to be able to recreate so many voices accurately. And because, you know, in each episode you write 4 A, B, C, D storylines, so you're writing for a lot of characters. And even if you say you particularly like a certain character, they'll always ask you which character you want to do a shadow for. Within that episode, that character might be in the storyline A, but you've got a B, C and D storyline with other characters in, and you really have to nail each of those voices, and that's what I wasn't able to do at that time. I've been approached since by somebody for another opportunity with EastEnders, and I'm thinking about it. You know, I really would love to. Yeah, it's a learning thing. I'd like to know if I can do it. Can I do it?
It's a very specific way of writing, though, isn't it? Is to have that very fixed blueprint that you're working to. Yeah.
And I watched a lot of the older EastEnders, and they would definitely had more freedom in the structure and everything, the writers in those days. But then they were only producing 2 a week, you know, and that's when I'd fallen in love with the program many years ago. And you know, it is a very different animal now. But yeah, but all the things I write for are different, and all of them have different structures or no structures. They all have a structure, they have a world you have to write for, and you have to buy into that when you're writing for them, and you have to understand, and I actually really love it when I understand the structure. Yeah, I think with EastEnders, for me, it was just managing all of those voices. I just couldn't quite nail all of those voices, and you know, it might be something that's just something I'm not great at, you know. I might not be a continuing drama writer, I don't know. I mean, Rob, you saying you had 3 or 4 months to write a Father Brown, that seems more my thing. I don't like that. And I don't know what structure, but yeah, I learned a lot. I mean, I learned, and they were so lovely. They were all lovely people, the script editors and everything. But I do believe in the program, things can change very quickly, and you have to change quickly. You have to work very it's very intense, the work for EastEnders. So big learning curve. I learnt a lot. It certainly gave me a glimpse into a world I have never worked in before, and one I'm intrigued by, I suppose, with that answer. Yeah, I think that answers the question.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mandy. No, it's really interesting to hear about your experience on that as well, because it is such a specific thing, isn't it? Great advice, both. Thank you very much, and thanks so much for your time this lunchtime. We really appreciate it, all your brilliant advice and sharing your experience so generously. It's wonderful. We're going to be doing the drop-in session where you can chat to the Writers Room team and ask us any questions about the process for applying to WAGs, a bit more about what it's all about. That's going to be another lunchtime session on the 4th of April. We'll share details about how to get involved and join that closer to the time. Thanks to our brilliant guests. Thanks to Vicky and Jess, our interpreters. Thanks to the audience today for all your brilliant questions and interest in the Writers Access Group. Just want to take this opportunity to wish you all tons of luck with your applications and your script submissions. And do please join us for that drop-in session next month. And have a brilliant day. Thank you.
Good luck, everyone.